This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
O'Reilly! You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week, but Bob and I are back again to talk about spring training predictions as we get into part 2 of forecasting what we think is going to happen in Sarasota over the next month or so. This episode, we're going to break down some of the position battles. Will Kobe Mayo, a top prospect, make the Orioles opening day roster? Which outfielders will go north with the team? How will the pitching staff shake out? All of those questions and more will be on tonight's episode of Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And Bob, I think we'll just go ahead and jump right in here with this first prediction. In the last couple of years, we've had a lot of buzz surrounding a top prospect coming into camp and a lot of hopes that player was going to make the roster, only for it to not happen and Orioles social media to explode. This year, that might or might not happen again with Kobe Mayo. Does Kobe Mayo make the Orioles opening day roster?
I think he's going to make the Orioles' job incredibly difficult, one way or the other. I know that much. I saw an amazing tweet / skeet blue sky post that from, I believe it was Jake Rill, talking about Kobe Mayo's batting practice session today and how he hit ball over. No, it was Brandon Mortensen, excuse me, from Masson All Access. He hit a ball well over the left field wall, clearing whatever mile marker that it's out there. And then he followed it up with, he just did it again, three times in a row. So I think Kobe Mayo is there to prove a point this year. He's still working out mostly, if not exclusively, at third base so far this spring, which obviously hard to find room for him there at the beginning of the season. But I think it says a lot that they still believe in the glove there. They think it will make him a more valuable player, and it will. You can always, he knows how to play first base. I don't think that's going to be a tough switch if and when he needs to, whether it's temporary or permanent. To answer the question, I have a hard time with how the roster is currently constructed, seeing where he fits in, but at the same time, I have faith that the Orioles are going to find a way to make him eligible for that Rookie of the Year bonus draft pick at the end of the year. So I'm going to play a little bit of a middle game where I think he's going to have a great spring. I think he's going to impress a lot of people and piss off a lot of fans when the Orioles don't bring him way north to Toronto for the opening series. But I think he will be brought up to the team, similar to Jackson Holiday last year and Grayson Rodriguez the year before that, before the deadline, to make him eligible for the Rookie of the Year draft pick. So I think a week into the season, they'll find a way, whether it's an injury or a trade or what have you. I think they'll find a way to make him eligible for that pick. But to hedge my bets, I will say he does not make the opening day roster officially.
That's kind of where I fall on this too. I do think that he's going to put together a nice spring, and with that loud power, he's going to be generating a lot of buzz. There's going to be a lot of discussion about Ramon Urias if Kobe Mayo doesn't make the roster, and I get that, but I actually feel like Mayo's chances of making the team were hurt more by the fact that the Orioles did not move on from Ryan Mountcastle this offseason. That seemed like Mayo's most logical opening was if the Orioles would flip Mountcastle and not acquire anybody else to play first base outside of maybe putting Tyler O'Neill there from time to time. That would be where Mayo gets in. But I think the Orioles do believe that Mountcastle can bounce back a little bit with the wall moving in. And you do have Urias there who's going to play some third base and can play first base in emergencies. So for the time being, I don't see Mayo cracking the opening day roster. With that said, I do agree with you that if the Orioles really believe that he has a shot at winning Rookie of the Year, they'll find a way to get him up early in the year. And I don't know exactly what that window is and he would have to be up, but they'll find a way to get him in there. And I just did a little bit of looking ahead to the Orioles' first two opponents, the Blue Jays and the Red Sox in the regular season. Between the two teams, their projected rotations only have one lefty, and that's Garrett Crochet. And we know that the lefty-heavy pitching stabs of the teams that the Orioles faced last year were a factor in Jackson Holliday being held back, or at least that's long been speculated. So in this case, there's going to be a lot of righties on the mound, which probably means a lot of at-bats for Heston Kjerstad and Ryan O'Hearn early on. I haven't gone far enough out into the Orioles schedule to see when they'll start facing more lefties, but that's something to keep in mind. So I think Mayo starts the year down in Norfolk, but finds his way to the majors before too long.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And, I could see them making that trade that we talked about in the first half of this prediction preview for spring training, whether it is a Mountcastle or Urias. If I feel like if you trade one of them, then all of a sudden I see the opening for Mayo. Obviously, if Mountcastle's traded, he's the right-handed platoon partner for Ryan O'Hearn, at least early on until Mayo, gets settled in. Then I think he'll be mostly an everyday guy. But even if Urias is traded, and if they still have him working out at their base, maybe that's the reason you do that. And then when you're facing a lefty, you can slide Westberg over to second base if they feel like Holliday needs to be platooned at least early on the season. And then Mayo finds bets at third base or DH or what have you. So, yeah, I think I'm not ruling it out. I think it could easily be a Colton Cowser situation where he's just great in spring training. And it's like, all right, you found your way onto the opening day roster, and then you got to earn some regular playing time from there, which Cowser did. And I think Mayo would do as well. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how the spring goes. Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is just completely out of his hands, no matter how he performs in the spring. It's more about what the Orioles decide to do with the roster construction and if there are any injuries. But I think he's going to do everything in his power to make it.
I will say this, though, after back-to-back off seasons where Mike Elias kind of teased the possibility of a big prospect making the opening day roster, Grayson Rodriguez before the 23 season and Jackson Holliday before last year, it was kind of nice to see that talk on the back burner this offseason. I think it kind of cooled the temperature a little bit among the fan base. So, I know that there's going to be people upset, and rightfully so, if Mayo has a good camp and doesn't make the opening day roster, but at least the Orioles have not come out and set the expectation that there's a job there for him to lose.
Yeah, that's a good call there. I think, maybe he learned from why am I putting this pressure on myself needlessly? Mike Elias. We know I'm a member of the Mike Elias cult, as some of our biggest fans will tell you. But maybe he doesn't need to make semi promises that he doesn't intend in keeping. But I think keeping it open-ended is the right way to go.
We talked about this player a little bit on our last episode, but let's get into some hypothetical numbers here, or possible numbers. How many home runs will Samuel Basallo hit this spring?
Oh, it's interesting. I think he's going to be playing a decent amount, but I don't expect him to make. I mean, wouldn't it be crazy if he ends up being the prospect that makes it to opening day in 2025 instead of 2026? But I'll say 4. I'll say he'll hit 4 home runs, which is a decent amount for spring training that you're not playing every day. You're getting limited at bats early on. I think that the year Heston Kjerstad was like 2023. I think he had 3 home runs, 3 or 4 that spring training, and that was enough to get everyone riled up to see him. So, yeah, I'll say 4. Be optimistic. He could go Jake Fox with 6 or 7, but I think 4 is what I will say.
I'll go with 2. So I think he gets a hold of a couple, and I think that they're both tape measure shots. But I don't know how many at-bats he gets, so I'll hedge a little bit and say 2.
Yeah, and regardless of how many home runs he hits, like I said in the first half of this episode series, this is Samuel Basallo's spring training. They might as well call it, instead of ST for spring training, SB, because it's Basallo is the star. Everyone else is just along for the ride. That's the vibe I'm getting. And like I said, I think we're going to leave spring training and be like, when is that guy going to be up in the majors to help this team? Even though the offense is already elite as it is, I just think he's special. He's a special player and prospect.
On a different note, now we'll focus on some of the more established players on the roster and try to figure out which of them are going to make the team. Which outfielders will make the opening day roster?
Yeah, I don't think there's much surprises here in the outfield because, and I'll go to roster resource on Fangraphs. I think they do a really good job of keeping track of this stuff, but they have Tyler O'Neill, Colton Cowser, Cedric Mullins, Heston Kjerstad, and Ramon Laureano. And I think I completely agree with them. I think most days you're going to have Cowser in left, Mullins in center, O'Neill in right, at least against right-handed pitching. And then Heston Kjerstad, DH, with Ryan O'Hearn at first base. I think that makes sense to me. And then when there's a lefty on the mound, you shift Cowser over to center field and you move Laureano into left. Maybe you give O'Neill some DH days against lefties. He can focus on hitting, and you move Kjerstad in the right in those circumstances. But I think 5 outfielders, and those 5 outfielders in particular, make a ton of sense. I think you're going to see Mullins come in when he's not starting, coming in late for speed and defense. And then, you know, if we need some offense late in a game when a lefty comes in, you see Laureano pinch hit for him, and you can move Cowser to center in that situation as well. It's a nice benefit when you have 2 guys who can play a really, really good center field in the way Mullins and Cowser can. So, yeah, I think the platoons and the, you know, using the left-handed versus right-handed pitchers, that kind of thing that Hyde loves to do. I think he's in a perfect situation to do it even more this year to kind of maximize the value of that.
Yeah, I have Cowser, Mullins, O'Neill, Kjerstad, and Laureano as my opening day outfielders as well. I don't know that we'll see Kjerstad in the outfield a ton this year. I think that it's mainly going to be limited to right field, especially at Camden Yards. I really hope we don't see him in left field, even with the wall moving in. It does dawn on me, though, that we never really took the opportunity to talk about the Laureano signing when it happened. I think we had other topics planned that week and just didn't really change course. For what Ramon Laureano is, which is a backup outfielder, I like the move for the Orioles. He's probably going to play once or twice a week in an ideal situation. He hits lefties well, and although I don't expect what he did in Atlanta in the second half last year to carry over, he's going to come back down to earth a little bit. Still a good defender, got a good arm in the outfield, can hit lefties. That's really all you need him to do. If someone gets hurt, that's a problem you can't really expect him to solve. But I do think that Laureano is a nice pickup. And what this also does is leaves the first guy off my list, Dylan Carlson, with an opportunity to get regular at-bats in Norfolk. I do think that that was a little bit of a development move for the Orioles where they wanted to see, okay, can we unlock something here? And I don't know how much you could realistically unlock from the bench at the major league level, but he has multiple options and multiple years of team control remaining. So if he goes down to Norfolk and plays in their outfield every day and hits really well over the first couple months of the season, I'll take that as a sign that maybe the Orioles, have at least gotten Dylan Carlson back to the point where he can be a serviceable major league option. But for now, they're in a good position. They don't have to have him try to be that guy from day one this season.
Yeah, I love the Laureano signing quite a bit. I feel like if you are an Austin Hayes fan, you should definitely be a Ramon Laureano fan because he's going to hit lefties. He's got an amazing arm from the outfield. He's play a solid corner outfield. I don't think he can really play center as much. He could stay in there if you need him to, but he's basically Austin Hayes, I feel like, for a cheaper amount and less name recognition for Orioles fans, at least. And from what I've been able to tell, and much better. And I know Austin Hayes had his fans in the clubhouse, but I feel like Ramon Laureano gets just perfect marks for clubhouse chemistry and being a guy that can get fired up, but has a good personality as well. So I just think he's an amazing fit for this team. And, Rubenstein said recently that money is not an issue. So a 1-year, $4 million deal, if it's not working out, you DFA him and then you bring up Carlson or whoever, Daz Cameron, plenty of options in the outfield down in AAA. I think the outfield in Norfolk is going to be pretty loaded between Carlson, Cameron, you got Jordan Adams, Nick Gordon, Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian, Franklin Barreto, and Hudson Haskin all vying for playing time down there. So, yeah, if it's not working out, no big deal. But I think it was a really, really smart move. And I know that the Orioles fans don't want to hear, depth at starting pitching, depth in the lineup. But depth is important. And it helps you withstand injuries and poor performance. So I liked it a lot. And I think your point about Dylan Carlson is a really good one. I think he is a project play. And if they can even get him to like 100 to 110 WRC plus type of hitter, again, that's an excellent reserve outfielder that you have under control.
Listeners, are you looking for a shortcut to better auto insurance for you? Something that takes all the research off your plate, something that's easy, something that matches you at lower rates, something genius. That's where NerdWallet comes in. These nerds have already done the work for you. Just answer a few questions and ta-da, you'll be matched with top insurance providers in your area. Find the right rate for you today at nerdwallet.com. After all, using NerdWallet is more than just smart, it's genius. Not all applicants will qualify for the lowest monthly payments. NerdWallet Insurance Services, Inc. CA resident license number OK92033.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We'll turn our attention to the non-roster invitees in camp this spring. And as we talked about in our last episode, there's some pretty interesting bullpen arms in the mix there. You have Rodolfo Martinez, who's generating a lot of buzz early in camp. Raul Alcantara, who Nick has written about several times, a lefty with good stuff that you should definitely have your eye on. Matt Bowman, who actually did a pretty good job for the Orioles late last year out of the bullpen, is in camp as a non-roster invitee and could be depth for them at some point during the season. And if you want to learn more about some of the non-roster guys, you can go back to one of our episodes last week where we broke them down. But you have some interesting names on the pitcher side. Some of the outfielders that Bob just mentioned are in camp as non-roster invitees. Not to mention you have Emmanuel Rivera, who was on the Orioles over the final month or so of last season in camp as a non-roster invitee. So the question here is, does anybody from that group break through and make the opening day roster?
I think it's going to be tough unless there's that trade that we talked about before out of the bullpen, whether it's Brian Baker, Cionel Perez, with combination of something like that. I'm having a hard time seeing it. I think there will be a lot of guys from the non-roster invite that impress and that are on the tips of the team's tongue when it comes to who's going to be the first guy up when needed. Whether it's, Keegan Aiken has an option, we need an arm, send him down for the minimum, bring up Raul Alcantara, or forgetting his first name, Robinson Martinez, Rodolfo Martinez. I think these guys are going to be right there. Same with Cade Stroud and Luis Gonzalez, as talked about before. If one was going to make it, I will say Raul Alcantara, because if Ciano Perez is traded, I think you might want that extra left-handed pitcher, and he throws heat. He's got some good stuff, but at the same time, Rodolfo Martinez is dancing away at spring training, talking about how he hit 104 on the gun last year. He sits between 100 and 102 miles per hour. He's got a 4-pitch mix. Like, this guy sounds like the find of the century if he lives up to the hype once the games start being played. So I think it would be cool if one did, but I think they'll make the team, just not out of spring training necessarily.
Yeah, there are some players on this list that I do think could contribute to the team in 2025, and I think will contribute to the team in 2025, but I don't see that happening out of spring training for some of the reasons you just mentioned, and not to mention, too, that you have some guys who are on the 40-man roster that you could plug in if there's an injury. So if someone goes down the bullpen, you would still have Brian Baker around at that point if he's not moved. He could get that spot. If it's not him, you have Colin Selby. If you need an extra outfielder, you have Dylan Carlson there. You have Kobe Mayo on the 40-man roster. So the point being there that the 40-man roster is kind of deep right now with the lack of injury. So if someone does go down, I think you're going to see the Orioles plug in from that group. And even if you have something happen in the rotation, you still have Cade Povich on the 40-man. So there's a lot of flexibility on the 40-man roster in that area right now. So I don't think they need to go with someone from the non-roster invitee slate, but I agree with you that multiple players from that group could end up contributing to the major league team.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they didn't, just looking at the amount of pitchers that were needed the last few years, even as a team that's competing.
So we'll talk about the pitching now, and we'll start with the players that we think are going to go north with the team. Name the initial pitching staff, rotation, and bullpen included.
Okay, I could do that. Let's go with, we know the rotation is some order of Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, Charlie Morton, Dean Kramer, and Tomoyuki Sugano. And we know the back end of the bullpen is pretty firmly set with Felix Bautista, Andrew Kittredge, Gregory Soto, Yunier Cano, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Ciano Perez, and Keegan Aiken. And then really, I think we're just looking at that last 8th bullpen spot as the one that could, unless they surprise with Keegan Aiken having options, maybe he struggles early or in spring and they think he needs a little time to get right. He could start in AAA, but I'm not counting. I don't think that's likely. So right now, Roster Resource has Albert Suarez in that 8th and final spot. There was a nice article either today or yesterday about Suarez adding a sweeper / slurve to his mix to give something with a little more break, because a lot of his pitches last year were all, 3 inches or less of movement on either direction. And this sweeper type of pitch will give potentially more swing and miss. I think maybe they want to see if that is an option. And he'll be right there in the bullpen if they need someone to step up and make a start potentially. I would love to see Colin Selby be that guy in the 8th spot, just because I'm a big fan. I think he's going to have a big year and make a name for himself in the Orioles bullpen. But it might have to be starting at AAA Norfolk for the season, just until they know what they're doing with Albert Suarez. Didn't have a great second half. In fact, had a poor second half. Didn't pitch as well out of the bullpen as he did as a starter. But give him a chance. I like I said earlier, this is not a team that just gives up on guys when they don't absolutely have to. So I think Albert Suarez will be given that chance to prove the doubters wrong, like Garrett in the Discord. So yeah, I think Roster Resource has it right. Vivek's asking Team Rodolfo Martinez. Yes, I am Team Rodolfo Martinez. I just think it might be a little bit later in the year when we get that train rolling.
So that's my 5-man rotation. Rodriguez, Eflin, Morton, Kramer, Sagano. And then for the bullpen, I have Bautista, Dominguez, Soto, Kittredge, Cano, Perez, Aiken, and Suarez. I do agree with you. I don't think the Orioles are going to move on from Albert Suarez just yet. And Andy Koska at the Baltimore Banner wrote a very good piece about the sweeper. That's what Bob was referring to a moment ago. that was published in the Baltimore Banner on Wednesday. We'll see whether or not that works out, but it's a clear sign that the Orioles know what Suarez's issue is, which is that he doesn't generate a lot of swings and misses, and that one of the biggest areas that could cause regression for him this year is that exactly. So I think they give him a little bit of time to work out of the bullpen to see if he can mix that pitch in. Not to mention, this is something that I think is worth pointing out, and I've brought it up before, but there are no scheduled off days for the Orioles over the first 2 weeks of the season. So I definitely don't think it hurts to have someone in the bullpen who has started recently that you could trust to go, hopefully you could trust to go 4 or 5 innings need be. So I do think that Suarez is going to be given a little bit of time out of camp to show what he can do and that he will make the opening day roster.
Yeah, I like it.
Now, on a different note, which pitcher will have the best spring but not make the opening day roster?
This is a tough one because it's not just relievers we're talking about. I think we got Cade Povich here in this. We got Chase McDermott and Brandon Young, maybe even some guys further down the list than that. Colin Selby, I think, is a good option to win this non-award. I'm going to go with Cade Povich. I have a hard time seeing him make the team as much as I would love to see him earn that role, and really deserves a longer look in the rotation after the way he ended 2024 with like a 2.90 ERA, something like that in the last month, 5 starts of the season. But I think he's going to show improvement even in the spring. I think he's going to pitch well, but it's just going to be unless there's an injury or a trade, then I don't think there's really room for him. He will make double-digit starts for the Orioles this year. I just don't think it's going to be out of spring.
That was going to be my pick too, based on the way that he finished last year. He had a pretty good September, and I think that he kind of helped keep the rotation afloat down the stretch when other areas of the roster, in particular the lineup, were really struggling with the Orioles. And had they come into camp with Povich projected somewhere in the back end of their starting 5, I would not have been upset. I don't think it's a bad thing for him to go back to AAA early in the year, but I also would not have been upset if he had gone and made the team out of spring training this year. So since you talked about Povich, I will shout out Brandon Young. He had a really nice year last year, and he didn't have some of the major regression we've seen pitchers have in terms of command when he went from Bowie to Norfolk last year. Yes, the walks went up, but they didn't go up in a way that really stalled his development. He kind of went, stayed steady down the stretch last year. So that bodes well for him coming into this spring. I think he'll put together a couple of nice starts. He'll start the season out in Norfolk's rotation, and then maybe by Memorial Day we see him make his major league debut. And it's probably going to be one of those, game 2 of a doubleheader type of situations where he's brought up for a start and goes back to Norfolk. But I do think that a major league promotion is going to be around the corner for Brandon Young, at least within the first couple months of the season.
Yeah, I could certainly see that as well. If it wasn't for Chase McDermott's lat injury to start spring, which is slowing him down, I might have picked him for this because I think he's a guy with impressive stuff that I talked about on a recent Top 50 Countdown episode, that he can get batters to swing and miss, whether he's in the zone, out of the zone, and even when they make contact, it's weak. Batters do not square up the ball against Chase McDermott. So I was hoping for a fully healthy spring for him. Unfortunately, it'll have to wait. But plenty of options for this one.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
This is a PSA, or public sock announcement. Experts have declared Bombas socks as the best way to warm up chilly feet. These pairs are super cushy, soft, and designed for maximum coziness. Plus, for every pair purchased, another pair will be donated, so someone in need of essential clothing can stay warm this winter. Go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
We'll go now to one of our annual prediction prompts here on the show, and it's one of our favorites, and it is, who is this year's Jake Fox Award winner? And for those who aren't familiar with that reference, that refers to Jake Fox when he was in camp with the Orioles. What was that? Sometime in the early 2010s. Hit 7 home runs and was never heard from again, at least as far as the Orioles were concerned. So every year we try to come up with a guy that no one is talking about coming into camp, who's going to put up big numbers offensively and then have little to no major league time with the Orioles the following season. Last year, I had Daniel Johnson as Jake Fox Award winner, and I thought that worked out pretty well. So I'm going to try to repeat my success here again this year. But, Bob, let's start with you.
All right. So I did some fact checking while you were reading the question and getting us into this. Wikipedia says on June 22nd, 2010, Fox was traded to the Baltimore Orioles for Ross Wolf in cash considerations. In spring training of 2011, he led the major leagues in home runs with 10 and extra base hits with 17. So it was 2011, and he hit 10 home runs. That's crazy. And he didn't make the team. Yeah, I'll go with Jordan Adams. I think this is a guy who's got silly power. He's not exactly a complete player. He's got some swing and miss, which is, I guess, why the Orioles are trying to take a flyer on him, because he was a great prospect at one point, and we feel like we can improve players' swing decisions and decrease their swing and miss, as we'll see with Judd Fabian and Vance Honeycutt or some of the bigger name projects on that. I think he'll run into like 3 home runs in the first couple weeks of spring, and people will be like, "Oh my God, Stuart Adams' character, is he gonna take Ramon Laureano's spot as that fifth outfielder?" And no, he won't. But I think he'll impress some people early on.
Yeah, that's my pick too, and I'm not even going to try to come up with another player because he just fits the mold so perfectly. He was a former top 100 prospect. In fact, Baseball Prospectus had him in their top 100 3 years in a row: 2019, 2020, 2021. And this is the kind of prospect that has failed in the Angels system repeatedly. Good raw power, but glaring swing and miss issues, kind of rust through the minor leagues a little bit. And just to get some perspective, Adams played in high A with Tri-City in 2021, and that was coming off the COVID year. The following year, he was at Double A and High A, and then he went to Triple A the next year. So he wasn't exactly rust through, but still made his major league debut at 23 years of age in 2023. Struggled to get a foothold at the major league level, and his numbers in Triple A have generally been solid, but not exactly eye-popping. And I think it's largely because of the swing and miss issues. But I think he'll have a good camp with the Orioles. And if you're a Norfolk Tides fan, I think you're going to have a lot of fun watching him this year because, if nothing else, you're going to have a little bit of power added to the Tides lineup. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to go with Adams, former first-round pick, former top 100 prospect. Let's see what he can do this spring.
Yeah, I believe he's still only 25 or 26. I think he's like about to turn 26. So interesting name. And remember Peyton Burdick? He was a lot of fun early 2024. I think Jordan Adams could be in a similar spot to Peyton Burdick in 2025.
Yep, Adams 25 years old. So still maybe some time for him to develop.
Yeah. And the Orioles love a project. We will say that.
Let's go to this last question, our last prediction, which is, what will be the overall vibe coming out of spring training? And since you came up with this question, Bob, I want to get some clarification. Is this the vibe in Birdland at large, or the vibe in the clubhouse, or the vibe that we think is in the clubhouse?
Why not both? I was first going to say the fan vibes of the fans coming out of spring training, but then I saw the Red Sox vibes aren't very strong. I saw that Toronto vibes aren't very strong after they failed to sign Vlad to an extension, and he's dead set on becoming a free agent now after the season. And meanwhile, Rodolfo Martinez is dancing, and Adley Rushman's wearing wigs, and Colton Cowser's teaching you how to eat a Pop-Tart. Yeah, seems like the vibes are good right now anyway in Orioles spring training camp, and I expect that to continue. As far as they're concerned, I think there are a lot of young players, get along, have fun playing the game. So vibes that way are going to be good. I even think that the vibes of the fan base is going to be better than it is now as we get closer to opening day, and the fact that we have a young, probably the best lineup in the American League coming into the season. I think the fans will get on board, at least to start the year. If there's any struggles early, then it could get ugly in Birdland. Not here. We're believers, but yeah, I think vibes are strong coming out of spring training.
Vibes will be good in the clubhouse coming out of camp. And they're not exactly going to come out and tell you if they're not good, but by all outward appearances, they will be good, and I think they actually will be good. As far as the fans go, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement around the lineup because I think that some of the concerns that hang over from the end of last season will be silenced a little bit. I think Adley's going to have a good spring. I think Gunner's going to do what
Best
Gunner
shape of his life.
does. And I think Jackson Holliday is also going to have a nice spring. So you take those three guys looking good in camp. Everything else at that point just kind of feels like a bonus. I do think you're still going to have what about the rotation? And I think that those questions are valid right now. But I think the mood will be that, one, everybody's excited that baseball is back. And two, we got this squad for now. Let's see what they can do. And I just hope that that's kind of where we are when we get out of spring.
I have one last thought, and not to end on a negative note, but to end on a negative note, who's gonna be the player or players that have a bad spring statistically, and fans are going to be worried, and ultimately it's not going to mean anything because spring training never does.
Well, that's a good one. I'll say that Ramon Urias does not have a good spring, and that will cause a lot of consternation because I feel like Ramon Urias, in fairness to him, I feel like he has to have a 900 OPS. Because that's what everybody has set for him is like, okay, you're blocking somebody, or I don't know why you're still on the roster, so you need to be 10 times the player you've always been. He's going to have a 700 to 740 OPS most years. That's just kind of who he is. I think Ramon Urias probably not going to have the best spring, and people are going to be worried about it. And I do think that at least early on, there's going to be a lot of worries about Felix Bautista, because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's trying to ramp himself up. And although everything that we have seen so far looks good, we can't expect him to come out of the gate 100%, certainly not at the beginning of camp, and probably not even at the beginning of the regular season. So I kind of feel like there's going to be some spring training version of his early appearances in the 2023 season. I remember he had a near blown save at Boston, and then I think he blew a save the next night. And then after that was dominant. But there was a little bit of concern early on, like, what's wrong with Felix Bautista? And then he got it right. I think that he's going to have an outing early on where he walks a few guys, maybe gives up a home run, and initially things don't look great. But then it's not going to matter because he's just going to go back to doing what he always does.
I like it. I was thinking Cedric Mullins, if he has a poor spring, he might get fans, because he had a rough first half in 2024. Fans are always ready to jump on Cedric Mullins' case. I could see that happening again. And for some reason, I'm picturing Tyler O'Neill, like with a week left before the season, having a 150 batting average with a 45% strikeout rate in spring, and then ultimately it doesn't matter, and he goes back to being Tyler O'Neill once the games start mattering again.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. So that does it for our spring training predictions. We're going to be back next week, and right now we're slated to reveal our top 50 prospects countdown when we come back next week. We're going to do that probably in one episode. We're going to go 1 through 50 as we always do, and break down our top 50 prospects. Of course, if you're a member of our Patreon community, you will know that before the main episode. But this is still an opportunity for us to talk about every player, not just go through the list 1 through 50, but for the three of us to talk about where we had some differences along the way. And that's not something that we've necessarily been able to give a perspective on during the Patreon episodes because we do those alone. But this is going to be an opportunity for us to talk about some players that we think could move up the list, where our lists were different. And there's going to be a lot of discussion, so you're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and become a member of our community. By the time this episode airs, our top 50 countdown will be on the brink of its completion, or maybe have even completed, but you can still sign up. Go back and listen to those episodes, and then look forward to a whole season worth of bonus coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. So if you're not a member of our Patreon community, please consider signing up today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is a PSA, or public sock announcement. Experts have declared Bombas socks as the best way to warm up chilly feet. These pairs are super cushy, soft, and designed for maximum coziness. Plus, for every pair purchased, another pair will be donated, so someone in need of essential clothing can stay warm this winter. Go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.